You're welcome. I'm going to go and break down the gluten-free items that I use for this video. If you are here, welcome. That means you had patience enough for me to edit the video. Now this is found at Aldi. You don't have to use it for this recipe, but if you want to, you can. It's already pretty put together. The only reason I don't use it alone is because it's kind of sweet. But you could, and you can add whatever you want, like garlic powder, all that to, combat some of those flavors. Now this is what I usually use on a regular basis by itself. Now, of course, you're supposed to have self-rising, all-purpose flour, yada, 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 but we're working with gluten-free and gluten sensitivities here. So I'm going to use what I normally use. So you can use any type of yeast. Normally I use something that's fast active. I would generally use at least one pack if I'm making one batch. In the video, you see me cutting out 2 because I was making 2 batches because, again, in my video, I was freezing and I was making stuff for that time. So one of these. Now let me break down the recipe. I have it written down here and I will drop it in the box. I use 2 1/4 cup of whatever flour you have, all-purpose, gluten-free, whatever you want to use, okay? And then I use 1 packet of the yeast, 1 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. Measure with your heart. I'm not judging you. You add whatever amount of salt you want to use. Sometimes people use 1 teaspoon, 1/4, whatever, okay? And then you're going to use a very warm 2 2/3 warm water. It needs to be pretty warm because you want to use that with mixing, and then you're going to have to, we'll get there. And then 3 tablespoons of oil, right? Now when you're making your bread, you can add whatever seasonings you want. You can spice it up to your liking. I hope this helps in breaking down the ingredients. Now let's get to the video. Okay, so these are my packets. I put them in my mixing bowl. I add my sugar and I have my warm water to cover this. I use about 1/2 cup and I set it aside, as you can see, and then I start with my dry ingredients. Again, this day I use a 1/2 and 1/2 mixture of the 2 flours that I showed you earlier. Generally I just use 1, but again I used what I had, and I ended up using about 4 1/2 cups of flour because I was making a double batch. I go in and start seasoning. I use the seasons that I have, garlic powder, onion powder, Italian seasoning, whatever it is that floats your boat that you want to pop out in the crust of your pizza. You can add shreds of cheese. This is your time for you to go in and do your dough the way you want. So this is my yeast. It's ready to be used. I go ahead and pop it in the mixer, add my attachments, and then I start adding my dry ingredients slowly. I don't put everything in at the same time. On the side, I have my warm water for this mixture. That way, when I mix it together, I get the consistency I need. Now, if it's too wet, add a little flour. If it's too much flour, add a little bit of water. This is what I got going on here. It's starting to mix. I just let it do its thing for about a couple minutes. It doesn't have to be in there for a long time because I always use a fast acting yeast. That way it cuts my waiting time, I wouldn't even say in half. What you say, like 10%, because you really don't have to wait as much. So I make sure everything is being mixed, and once I'm finished, I remove my hook, drop my dough in there, take everything off because I'm done. Now I like to prep my board with some flour And you can use a rolling tool, but I just go for it. I use my hand, honey. And I just go ahead. I'm not kneading it the way people would really need it for a while, because I really don't have to. I'm just making a pizza dough. And I'm just patting it into some circles to be able to put to the side. And as you can see, I have my parchment paper ready. I'm going to place the parchment paper in between each slice. That way it does not get stuck together. And again, like I said, I just pretty much pat um, my pieces, and I try to make them as even as possible. One thing about making pizza dough, you can never go wrong with this dough. You just make it to your liking, and like I said, you can roll it, you can use your fingers, you can do what you want to do. Okay, so I'm making a lot, I'm making extra batches, so this is what I'm doing today. And um yeah. Now I am going to cut the sides of my parchment paper because they are going to go into bags for me to seal them closed. I want to make sure that they fit. Yeah. So I just basically add them in there. I ended up adding a extra piece on the top so it does not stick to the plastic. And I just basically repeat this step in measuring the bag, because I ended up with like 2 or 3 bags. And as you can see, I pretty much stacked them about 3 or 4 together in each bag, because one bag is enough for a serving. Generally, it's I'm only feeding 3 people, and yeah. So those two are prepped. Then I get my sealer. Those are the ones I'm going to cook today. I use my sealer and basically get those ready. Now this was a trial and error thing. I love a good mixed method study. So these actually came out good, and I was actually able to take them out the freezer, let them thaw, and use them for the next time I made pizzas. So it really worked out really good. That's why I kind of waited to make the video, because I wanted to see how it actually hold and how they really actually taste after freezing them. So again, I'm going to put those up, and then I'm going to go ahead and spray my pan. Use whatever type of pans you have. The $1.25 pans, they work fine. You drop them in there, you spray because you don't want your stuff real dry, and then put it in the oven. Baking the crust, I generally bake the crust between like 375 for like 7 minutes, and then I take it out and I add my toppings to it. Now my sauce, I generally water bath and make my own sauces so they are readily accessible. And I just use sometimes a pizza blended cheese or just a regular mozzarella cheese to make mine. And yeah, and then I pop them back in, and it takes about a few more minutes, maybe about 5 or 6 more minutes, just to melt all the toppings and cook them, and you have pizza. So this right here is the dough, and it shows how it looks on one side, and I flipped it over. I generally flip mine over, especially if my dough is a little bit thicker. Now if it's really thin, I don't. Those right there I left in a little longer, but they actually came out really good. And now I'm going to take everything out. This is the cheese. Now with this cheese, I did actually use some of the cheese sliced off of a block. So that's how that one looks. I almost dropped it. And this is the rest of them. I have pepperoni, and then I have another cheese here. Enjoy.